They called her a beggar's daughter. They said she had no class, no pedigree, no business being inside the walls of a family like theirs. They laughed when she walked through the door and whispered behind her back at her own wedding. But one day, something happened that none of them saw coming. A turn so sharp, so sudden, that the very people who looked down on her could not believe what was standing in front of them. What happened? And how did a woman they threw out like yesterday's news end up sitting at the very top? Sit back. Because this story will shake you. Grace grew up in a small house in Mushin, Lagos, with her mother, a woman who sold tomatoes at the roadside to pay school fees. Grace had nothing but her brain and her character. She graduated from university with a degree in business administration, quiet, hardworking, and full of faith. When she met James Cole, she did not know his family name or what it carried. She only knew the man. And the man seemed kind. They married. But from the very first day Grace entered that compound as a wife, James's mother, Mama Rose, a woman with cold eyes and a sharp tongue, looked her up and down and said to a relative, loud enough to be heard, "This is what my son chose. A market woman's daughter. We have failed." Grace smiled and said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was sometimes the strongest answer. Every morning Grace woke early, cooked, cleaned, and managed the home with everything she had. But nothing she did was ever enough. If the soup was rich, it was too salty. If she dressed simply, she was a village woman. If she dressed well, she was trying too hard. James saw all of it and said almost nothing. He was a man who loved his mother more than he loved peace, and that was the root of every problem under that roof. His younger sister Sandra arrived from Abuja for a holiday visit and never left. She treated Grace like a servant, left messes for her to clean, and ran to Mama Rose with exaggerated stories whenever Grace said a word. James would come home, hear one side, and look at Grace with cold eyes. "Why are you always causing problems?" he would say. Grace would stand there, speechless, her heart cracking piece by piece. One afternoon, Grace came home from the market to find the living room full of James's relatives. Nobody had told her. Mama Rose sat in the center like a queen and spoke without blinking. "We called this meeting because of you," she said. "You came with nothing. You brought nothing. And now you are making his life miserable." Grace looked around the room. Every face was cold. Every eye was a verdict. That night she sat on the bathroom floor and wept until her body shook. She had given this marriage 3 years of her life. 3 years of holding her tongue when she wanted to shout. 3 years of loving a man who kept choosing his family over his wife. 2 weeks later, James sat on the edge of the bed and told her without looking up that he thought they needed a break. Grace stared at him and understood exactly what he meant. She packed 2 bags. She did not cry in front of them. She walked out of that gate with her head held up. But the moment she reached the street, she stopped. And she stood alone in the hot Lagos sun, wondering where she was supposed to go. She called her only true friend, a woman named Linda who ran a small tailoring shop in Suralia. Linda was not rich. She had barely enough space. But she said 3 words without hesitating. "Come. I am here." Grace slept on a mat beside Linda's sewing machine. At night, the sound of passing cars and distant generators filled the air. It was nothing like the coal house. But it felt safer, because there was no one there to wound her with words. One afternoon, a customer came in with a fabric and a photo torn from a magazine, a complicated structured jacket with pleating and layering that Linda was not sure she could attempt. Grace leaned over, picked up a pencil, and sketched the full pattern from memory and instinct in minutes. The customer stared. "Young lady," she said slowly, "you have a gift." That customer was Mrs. Haruna, events coordinator for one of the largest bridal companies in Lagos. And she would change everything. 3 weeks later, Mrs. Haruna returned with a business card and a proposal. Their lead designer had cancelled last minute on a high-profile wedding. She needed someone creative and fast. Grace said yes before fear could say no. She worked for 21 days without rest, sketching by lamplight, sourcing fabrics with the little money they had, sewing alongside Linda piece by piece, dress by dress. When the bridal party walked out on the wedding day in Grace's designs, the room went quiet. Then everyone reached for their phones. By the end of the month she had 30 new client inquiries. By the third month she had rented her own studio, small but entirely hers, and named it Grace and Thread. 1 year after leaving that compound with 2 bags and a broken heart, Grace was on the cover of one of Nigeria's leading lifestyle magazines. The headline read, "The woman behind Lagos's most talked about wedding looks." It was Sandra who saw the magazine first, flipping through it casually at a salon. She sat up straight and stared. She called Mama Rose immediately. James heard about it from a work colleague and went home that night to search Grace's name. He found the article. He found the photos. He found the interviews where she spoke with warmth and without a single drop of bitterness about her journey. He sat in the dark for a long time. Then he called her. His voice was low. "Grace, I made a mistake. I allowed my family to destroy something I should have protected. Can we please talk?" Grace closed her eyes. She thought about the bathroom floor. She thought about the 2 bags and the mark beside the sewing machine. She thought about every night she prayed when she could not see the morning. Then she spoke calmly. "James, I forgave you because I had to. I needed to forgive so the weight of it would not follow me into my future. But some doors, once closed, are not meant to be opened again. I wish you well. I truly do." She ended the call. Then she smiled. Not a bitter smile. Not a proud one. The smile of a woman who had found herself on the other side of the storm and realized she was exactly where she was always supposed to be. Today, Grace and Thread has dressed some of the most celebrated brides in West Africa. Linda manages the studio and earns more than she ever dreamed. Grace moved her mother from Mushin into a quiet, clean home in Gogoda without noise or announcement, because that is simply who she is. They called her a beggar's daughter. They pushed her out of a house that was never truly a home. But God does not use people's opinions to write destinies. He uses pain as a pencil and time as his canvas. And what he painted in Grace's life left every single person who mocked her completely without words. Remember this. The people who close doors on you may one day stand outside the windows of what you built. And the question is never whether you will rise. The question is only when.